Look at me constantly having the read and going for the shield breaker only for it to not break anything and get me punished. As someone who's main Lucina since the Smash 4 days, I've always loved the shield breaker. In characters like these two, who are, let's face it, pretty simple characters, having this move feels like the closest thing they have to a gimmick or even like a DLC thing.
Deep breath.
Oh my god!
Hard-hitting neutral beats that you charge or that take a while to come out aren't usually seen as good moves. Attacks like Falcon Punch or Warlock Punch are basically unusable unless you're winning by a lot and want to see if you can get away with it. And while Roy, Chrom, and Ike's neutral beats are good as shield break punishes or for 2-framing or even for movement, they're usually not moves that you'll use a lot for their original intended purpose. So if the shield breaker has a lot of these properties we usually see in these moves, why is it way better than the others? Mainly, it doesn't need to be fully charged for it to be useful, and it doesn't have too much end lag, which means its startup isn't much of a weakness because you just don't need the startup for it to come out. Then there's the shield damage. A lot of you might not know this, and it's likely the main reason you don't break a lot of shields, but in a regular fight, most of the time you won't be charging it all the way, meaning it will rarely break a fully charged shield. The uncharged version of this move still does crazy shield damage, but if you actually want to kill your opponent at 40, you need to make sure that your opponent's shield is already damaged at least a little before you go for it. Finally, this move is in its own league of chargeable strong moves because of how well it synergizes with Marth and Lucina's kit. With most of their moves being quick and safe but still surprisingly strong, these two are amazing at shield pressure, which if you practice enough means more panicking, more bad habits, and more openings to punish it all with the shield breaker. It's not like Falcon Punch or Byleth's down B or any of these moves, because in this case Marth and Lucina can actually get some real results throwing out the shield breaker, and it's not just a random strong move with 10 years of startup shoehorned into a character who really doesn't need it or who would be better off with something else. I'll mention this again because it's very important, but the main reason people end up not breaking shields with this move is because they think throwing it out will always be enough to break it. Sure, there will be times where your opponent panics and just holds shield on you somehow and lets you charge up the whole thing, but most of the time you'll be going for the uncharged version or a slightly charged version. And if you want to break shields with those, you need to first deal a little bit of shield damage with your other moves and let the shield breaker serve as a finisher to all the shield pressure you've been doing, and not just let it be a move you throw out every now and then to see if it works. So now that you know how it'll actually break shields, it's all about fundamentals and figuring out when your opponents like to shield on you. This is probably the easiest way to do it, but if you notice someone has a habit of, for example, neutral get up to shield, or hold shield when they whiff something, or spot dodges when they whiff but then shield when you didn't try to punish the spot dodge, practicing to pick up on these things is the best way to find your opening. Still, once you start playing against better opponents, they'll become harder to read, but even top players can be caught shielding when they shouldn't be, so it's all about improving at paying attention. Play the game normally and eventually you'll damage their shield a little. Keep in mind it regenerates pretty quickly, but if you know it's taking some damage, then keep your eyes open and remember you could throw it out before it regenerates. If you're not sure about your read and you don't want to risk it, then go for something else. It's not a good idea to throw it out without being sure, and if you're Marth and Lucina, it's not like you don't have anything else to punish with. If you have a read, you can still go for it regardless of the position you're in. I talked about going for it after you've been pressuring shields or picking up on habits, but even when you're in a tight spot, a lot of people hold shield at ledge, for example, or when you're in the air because they think you're gonna land with an aerial. It's still risky though, and remember it doesn't break full shields uncharged, but if you've done some damage to it and you're sure you have a read on them, then go for it. Just don't get predictable because that's how the game works. In most characters, the point of shield pressure is to make your opponent shield more, and pick up bad habits, use unsafe options, or do anything else just to get themselves back in neutral, leading to nice punishes and earlier kills. Moves like down tilt or fair are great as shield pressure tools, for example, because they're very safe and do okay shield damage. So that, along with their speed, means your shield pressure game is strong already, but while everyone's shield pressure game is about punishing options after they let go of their shield, Marth and Lucina can do that efficiently for sure, or they could just skip all of that and break your shield before you pick an option. Everyone knows this move. Everyone knows what it does. So if you fish for it, people are just gonna expect it and you'll never break a shield. If you don't think it's gonna break, you really have no reason to go for it. It has some other uses, sure, like using it for recovery, for example, or if you hit someone but they don't shield it, it's a pretty strong hit. But offensively, I'd keep it in the back and throw it out when I'm certain my opponent's shield has taken enough damage and I have a feeling that they're gonna shield soon. Being predictable makes you lose, and this move has some lag to it, so remember, going for the shield breaker takes commitment and it's not something to throw out like an aerial or a tilt. You could do this, I guess, and it would make people shield on you less, but if you're looking to use this move to its true potential, only use it when you're sure it will do the job. Before I finish, don't think that this is the best way to kill or that you should always be trying to get the shield break, because I wouldn't say this is Marth and Lucina's best move, and it is nowhere near being their best kill option. These two are amazing in ultimate, and they have so many things that they can do to win games, and shield breaker is only one of those plays, and it's not a very common one. While something like down tilt to down smash or edge guarding with narrow forward air are pretty basic things you land more often if you're fighting someone of a similar skill level, most of the time the shield breaker does sort of require you to dominate the game for a little bit and pay attention. I'm not saying you literally have to be better than your opponent or it will never work ever, but if you look up shield break compilations, or if you remember when you've broken some yourself, you'll notice that most shield breaks happen while you have momentum by your side, aka after you've landed a nice string or a combo, or you've been pressuring your opponent's shield, or when you have a read. Even if you're not with momentum, going for a shield breaker out of the blue can also work if you have a feeling it will, but if you throw it out too much, most of the time you'll just be risking too much for it to be reliable. So if there's one thing to get out of this video, it's to know when to go for it and to not treat it like just another one of your zoner moves. And also subscribe and join the Discord. Thanks.